Hi, I'd like to talk today about the enemies and do sort of a post-mortem on the enemies of our game. I don't know how well the enemies turned out, especially some of the ones we worked on early in development, and I think an interesting sort of feedback I got, I can't remember who said it, but basically the idea was that the game is like super scary except when there's an enemy on screen, because then you know what to expect. Which I think is interesting feedback, and definitely not what we set out to do with the enemies. So, taking a step back, if you look at the, excuse me, the original demo for the Kickstarter, which plays very similarly to the Coming Storm level. We added staircases and sprinting and some other things, but basically it didn't change very much. There's no enemies, it's all just atmosphere and tension, and that was sort of, the prototype for the game, and I thought, we would have enemies, but I didn't really put much thought into how those would work at all. Well, this contains spoilers. If you haven't played the game, stop watching. Then the first enemy we did was the baby monster, and I was pretty happy at the time with how it worked. A lot of it is we're sort of limited to because we don't want to do HUD or help messages. It's very difficult to do enemy design, and like, for example, right before we released the game, we cut the second baby monster enemy setup, which if you played the demos at E3 or PAX or even earlier builds of the alpha or beta, basically the idea was you had to follow the baby monster, and people didn't always figure that out. They thought maybe they had to run forward to trigger it. They thought maybe they couldn't get by it. So we're also, got some feedback from, people and developers I respect that the baby monsters just weren't that scary. And so cutting one seemed like a good idea, especially one that was continually problematic. And we made a lot of changes, and I'm not sure all those were good. The baby monster used to be a little more unpredictable, but people had trouble with it. I liked the idea that, he could shake the cabinet or sniff the cabinet, but people realized that he was relatively straightforward and didn't have a lot of bite, which, was kind of the point, and kind of deliberate, just because, we wanted to make an easy-ish game and not a punishing one, and we didn't want to, make something that was just difficult to figure out. Anyway, then the inmates are interesting. I think some people really liked them, but, to me, I think there was some good moments with the inmates. I particularly like one of the setups where you have to go into a nook, and then the inmate walks by slowly and you have to, just not move. I think that one is probably the best inmate setup, and certainly I did a clever puzzle, well, what I thought was a clever puzzle with the breaking the glass and then moving, which I think is pretty gamey, and obviously we've been criticized that the game isn't gamey enough, which again was sort of a deliberate design decision. But But I mean, in general, I don't think that encounter was the best because while it's challenging and it's a puzzle, it doesn't really amplify the scares. And again, I think a lot of the inmate, design was sort of gamey, like, and I was pretty happy with it at the time, but, one of the things as I started working on the later enemies is that the enemy behavior isn't super important. I mean, in that, trying to create a believable entity or, something that behaves in a certain way that the player can figure out, I think is less important than trying to create an enemy that provokes a certain feeling. So, I mean, that's sort of what we did with the tormented girl and the dolls, the latter two enemies that I created, the tormented dolls, or sorry, tormented girls were kind of interesting. I mean, in that my original thing was all you had to do was run away. You run away and they just disappear like a ghost. I thought that was kind of cool, and I thought the idea of making you run away was good. I mean, because that's one of the things that I think Amnesia did really well, is that you're not supposed to look at the enemies, which creates a lot of mystery. I mean, the enemy model in and of itself, isn't the most, scary, amazing thing ever made. But there's this amazing sort of mysterious nature to it because you're supposed to not look at it. And so I was kind of trying to do that where basically, well, I guess the other thing is then you find yourself hiding behind a crate, waiting for the enemy to pass. Which I think, getting the player in a situation that's like a good fear reaction, I think helps amplify that. And so with the tormented girls, I was going for the fear reaction of, oh crap, I gotta run, and I was hoping that would, build some tension. It didn't quite pan out that way because, sorry, it turned out people didn't figure out they needed to run away. They wanted to I don't know, somehow get by or something. It was a disaster, and fortunately I have my alpha and beta backers to thank, but we basically changed, there's like 8 conditions, but there's like a bunch of different conditions, in which she'll disappear, if she's off screen, if she's a certain distance away, if you stay away for certain timers, if you go into another world, or another sort of room and come back, then she's gone, so, but I mean, overall, I like the feeling of, being caught in, just this bleak black atmosphere, and then, enemy just sort of appears and, oh crap, you gotta run away, and I think maybe we had too many of them, but, I liked some of the dynamics we had, and I mean, certainly we got some feedback we should have more encounters and have like 20 attack at once and do all these sort of gamey things, but, I mean, it didn't seem to really fit, in my mind. Then, the dolls are probably my favorite enemy, just because the nice part about them is that you don't know which ones are going to come alive, and we deliberately went back and put, even in the Lost Child level, we put the same doll models, because the dolls were sort of jointed a little differently, looked a little differently than the other ones. They were sort of redraws, so we went and put the exact same ones in. So then basically in Lost Child there's a bunch of the same dolls that just don't come to life, and then even in Wayward Dreamer there's a bunch of the same dolls and only some come to life. And I think that's a good tension and a good balance, is that you don't know which dolls are going to come to life and which aren't. And so I think, you know, a lot of the mistakes I made with you know, say the inmate and the baby monster is sort of from my experience working on action games. In action games, you come up with, you know, a hook for each enemy, a way to defeat them, and then you sort of play around with that and combining them in interesting ways. But I think you don't necessarily need or want a hook. To some extent, you want interesting and scary setups. So, I mean, just sort of envisioning it, it's like, you know, people said, oh, what if the baby monster did this, or what if he did that, or this would be really interesting, or really scary. And I think that's almost a better way to approach the enemy development. And it's a lot harder, right, because, you know, I think we would need a lot more animation, to do a bunch of interesting setups and more scripting and whatnot. But I think, you know, rather than saying, you know, this enemy has such and such behavior, we would be better off saying, we have this enemy, what are the interesting things this enemy can do? And so, you know, maybe we repeat some of them or do similar things, but put a twist on it. I don't know, that's kind of what I'm thinking, but I think, you know, in Neverending Nightmares, I think as we continue to develop the game, I mean, I think the Tormented Girl and the dolls are our best work from an enemy standpoint. And I mean, certainly there's the whole line of, you know, some people liked the sort of gaming aspects of, and puzzle aspects of the inmate. You know, some people got sick of the inmate, some people got sick of the asylum. I don't know, maybe I should have cut that level down, but then everyone thought the game was too short, so I don't know. But anyway, let me know what you think, which your favorite enemies were and why. So anyway, thanks for watching.